What's up, guys? Welcome to day 15. I would like to read John chapter 3, verse 27, where it says, "To this, John replied, a person can receive only what is given them from heaven." And so today we'll be diving into the story of Joseph interpreting the two dreams. We'll get started with Genesis chapter 40, where it says, "Sometime later, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker offended their royal master. Pharaoh became angry with these two officials and put them in the prison where Joseph was, in the palace of the captain of the guard. They remained in prison for quite some time, and the captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, who looked after them. While they were in prison, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker each had a dream one night, and each dream had its own meaning. When Joseph saw them the next morning, he noticed that they looked troubled. "Why do you look so worried today?" he asked them. And they replied, "We both had dreams last night, but no one can tell us what they mean." "Interpreting dreams is God's business," Joseph replied. "Go ahead and tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream first. "In my dream," he said, "I saw a grapevine in front of me. The vine has 3 branches that began to bud and blossom, and soon it produced clusters of ripe grapes. I was holding Pharaoh's wine cup in my hand. So I took a cluster of grapes and squeezed the juice into the cup. When I placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand, then I placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. This is what the dream means," Joseph said. "The 3 branches represents 3 days. Within these days, Pharaoh will lift you up and restore you to your position as his chief cupbearer. And please remember me and do me a favor when things go well for you. Mention me to Pharaoh, so he might let me out of this place. For I was kidnapped from my homeland, the land of Hebrews, and now I'm here in prison. I did nothing to deserve it." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given the first dream such a positive interpretation, he said to Joseph, I had a dream too. In my dream, there were In my dream, there were 3 baskets of white pastries stacked on my head. The top basket contained all kinds of pastries for Pharaoh, but the birds came and ate them from the basket on my head. This is what the dream means," Joseph told him. "And the 3 baskets also represent 3 days. 3 days from now, Pharaoh will lift you up and impale your body on a pole. Then birds will come and peck away at your flesh." Pharaoh's birthday came 3 days later, and he prepared a banquet for all his officials and staff. He summoned his chief cupbearer and chief baker to join the officials. He then restored the chief cupbearer to his former position so he could again hand Pharaoh his cup. Oh, excuse me. But Pharaoh impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had predicted when he interpreted his dream. Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, however, forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. Isaac lived for 180 years. Then he breathed his last and died at a ripe old age, joining his ancestors in death. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. Chapter 41. Two full years later, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing on the bank of Nile River. In his dream, he saw 7 fat healthy cows came up out of the river and began grazing in the marsh grass. Then he saw 7 more cows. Excuse me, I don't know, I'm so tired today. Then he saw 7 more cows come up and began grazing in the marsh grass. Then he saw 7 more cows come up behind them from the Nile, but these were scrawny and thin. These cows stood beside the fat cows on the riverbank. Then the scrawny, thin cows ate the 7 healthy fat cows. At this point in the dream, Pharaoh woke up. But as he slept again, had a second dream. This time he saw 7 heads of grain, plump and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were shriveled and withered at the east wind, and these thin heads swallowed up the 7 plump, well-formed heads. Then Pharaoh woke up again, realized it was a dream. The next morning, Pharaoh was very disturbed by the dreams, so he called for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. When Pharaoh told them his dreams, not one of them could tell him what they meant. Finally, the king's chief cupbearer spoke up. "Today I have been reminded of my failure," he told Pharaoh. "Some time ago, you were very angry with me, the chief baker and me, and you imprisoned us in the palace of the captain of the guard. One night, the chief baker and I each had a dream, and each dream had its own meaning. There was a young Hebrew man with us in the prison who was a slave of the captain of the guard. He told us our dreams, and he told us what each of our dreams meant, and everything happened just as he predicted. I was restored to my position as cupbearer, and the chief baker was executed and impaled on a pole." Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once, and he was quickly brought from the prison. After he shaved and changed his clothes, he went in and stood before Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream last night, and no one here can tell me what it means. But I have heard that when you hear about a dream, you can interpret it. "It is beyond my power to do this," Joseph said. "But God can tell you what it means and set you at ease." So Pharaoh told Joseph his dreams. "In my dream," he said, "I was standing on the bank of the Nile River, and I saw 7 fat, healthy cows come out of the river and began grazing in the marsh grass. Then I saw 7 sick-looking cows, scrawny and thin, come up after them. I've never seen such sorry-looking animals in all of land of Egypt. These thin, scrawny cows ate the 7 fat cows. But afterward you wouldn't have known it, but these were still as thin and scrawny as before." Then I woke up. In my dream, I also saw 7 heads of grain, and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were blighted, shriveled, and withered by the east wind. But the shriveled heads swallowed the 7 healthy heads. I told these dreams to the magicians, but no one could tell me what they mean. Joseph replied, "Both of Pharaoh's dreams mean the same thing. God is telling Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 healthy heads of grain both represent 7 years of prosperity. The 7 thin, scrawny cows that came up later, and the 7 thin heads of grain withered by the east wind represent 7 years of famine. This will happen just as I have predicted, for God has revealed to Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The next 7 years will be a period of great prosperity. throughout the land of Egypt, but afterwards there will be 7 years of famine so great that all the prosperity will be forgotten in Egypt. Famine will destroy the land. This famine will be so severe that even in the memory of the good years will be erased. As for having two familiar dreams, it means that these events have been decreed by God and He will soon make them happen. Therefore, Pharaoh should find an intelligent and wise man and put him in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh shall appoint supervisors over the land and let them collect 1/5 of the crops during the 7 good years. Have them gather all the food produced in the good years that are just ahead and bring it to Pharaoh's storehouses. Store it away and guard it so there will be food in the cities. That way there will be enough to eat when the 7 years of famine come to the land of Egypt. Otherwise, the famine will destroy the land. Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officers. So Pharaoh asked his officials, "Can we find anyone else like this man who so obviously filled with the Spirit of God?" So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will be a rank higher than yours." Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and placed it in Joseph's hand. He placed him in the fine leathern clothing and hung a golden chain around his neck. Then he had Joseph ride in the chariot reserved for his second in command, and wherever Joseph went, the command was shouted, "Kneel down." So Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of all Egypt, and Pharaoh said to him, "I am Pharaoh, but no one will lift a hand or foot in the entire land of Egypt without your approval." Then Pharaoh gave Joseph a new Egyptian name, Zaphanath Paneah. I don't know how you pronounce that name, but it is predicted to probably mean God speaks and lives. He also gave him a wife whose name was Asenath. She was the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On. I'm just trying to see. Yeah. So Joseph took charge of the entire land of Egypt. He was 30 years old when he began serving in the court of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And when Joseph left Pharaoh's presence, he inspected the entire land of Egypt. As predicted, for 7 years the land produced bumper crops. During those years, Joseph gathered all the crops grown in Egypt and stored the grain from the surrounding fields in the cities. He piled up huge amounts of grain like sand on the seashore. Finally, he stopped keeping records because there were too much to measure. During this time, before the first years of the famine, 2 sons were born to Joseph and his wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On. Joseph named his oldest son Manasseh, for he said, "God has made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family." Joseph named his second son Ephraim, for he said, "God has made me fruitful in the land of my grief." At last, the 7 years of bumper crops throughout the land of Egypt came to an end. Then the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had predicted. The famine also struck all the surrounding countries, but throughout Egypt there were plenty of food. Eventually, however, the famine spread throughout the land of Egypt as well. And when the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, everywhere, Joseph opened up the storehouses and distributed grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout the land of Egypt. And people from all around came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe throughout the world. And so that is the end for today. Many of us already have heard of this story before, but let's just go back to chapter 40. So yeah, basically what's happening in the story is, unfortunately, Joseph, as in the previous time that we talked about, was put in prison for wrongly accused of trying to have sex with Potiphar's wife, and how God still blessed Joseph in the midst of all the struggles that Joseph had to endure by having Joseph be a favoritism towards the prison warden, so that Joseph became a help to control, have power within the prison, even though he himself is a prisoner in the prison. But yeah, basically, so that happened, and then Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker must have did something terrible to have themselves thrown into prison for a while. And the fortunate thing is, Joseph was in charge of them too. And so both of them had a dream, as we all know. And then Joseph interpreted the chief cupbearer of how he's gonna go back to his position of serving under Pharaoh, while the chief baker was gonna be executed. The interesting about the chief baker is that just because something was predicted about the chief cupbearer does not have to mean that it's going to happen to him. He had this expectation of, oh, his dream sounds great, and so does my dream and stuff, which is obviously wrong because he got executed. But I just want to help us to challenge that just because something was to be said about one person, it doesn't have to mean that it's gonna happen to us exactly the same, right? It's like, even though the story between the two chiefs are unfortunate, but we can also relate into our modern time of how, like, just because somebody was really fortunate to have something, doesn't mean that we'll have the same exact thing, because obviously that's not the case. Doesn't mean that we're gonna have something bad, that like something bad is gonna happen to us. No, of course not. It's like, no, it just means like, don't hold yourself to an expectation of something great just because of somebody else's fortune, I guess. And so yeah, because it could let you down in a big way, as it happened to the chief baker, because he thought he was gonna get out of jail and be put back to his position to serve under Pharaoh, but instead he got killed and stuff. And so yeah, I really appreciate Joseph's heart of, he could have well said, oh, I have the power to interpret dreams, but instead he humbled himself before God by saying to the two prisoners that he has zero authority, zero power to be able to interpret their dreams, but with the help of God, he's able to do so, as it was said in verse 8, where it says, "Interpreting dreams is God's business." Joseph replied, "Go ahead and tell me your dreams." And so that Joseph wanted to praise God, wants the two prisoners to praise God after Joseph was able to interpret their dreams, because Joseph knows that, again, he has no power to interpret dreams unless God is with him and stuff. And that seems to be like the case for a lot of these stories. It's like the heroes are the ones who give credits to God, right? And the non-heroes are the ones who are having a God-given talent. But instead of praising God with those talents, they use it to their own benefits. And so as in modern times, as you reflect on the talents that God has given you, do you use it as a way to elevate yourself above others, or do you use it to elevate God above others, even though he's already elevated and stuff? And so yeah, think about that. But yeah, Joseph's dreams, as it was predicted, came true and stuff. And then Isaac unfortunately passed away and stuff. And now we got to the whole Pharaoh's dreams. And the thing about the Pharaoh's dreams I realized today is how like there were 7 good cows, 7 healthy cows, 7 skinny cows. It just sometimes I was like thinking of like, why did God send Pharaoh these 2 dreams when he got sent 1? Because Joseph did say that both of these dreams mean the same exact thing, but why did God send 2 instead of just 1 of them? And I feel like part of the reason is to show like the 7 healthy cows, it's for the animals. I think that God is trying to say, like, there's going to be 7 years of where animals, humans, where they're going to prosper, right? Where they're going to be healthy, be fruitful within these 7 years and stuff. And then the 7 corn stalks, about the plants, the healthy ones, it's just to show how like these 7 years, plants are gonna grow at its finest moment. Things are going to grow as the way it's supposed to be intended to, and it's gonna prosper at a greater level. And then those like 7 cows is all those years, like if Joseph wasn't there, right? If Joseph wasn't there to interpret the dreams, that's what's gonna happen to animals and humans in the 7 years of famine, where they're gonna get skinny, where they're gonna have diseases, where they're gonna starve to death, basically. It's just like a prediction of what Joseph basically said is like what's gonna happen and stuff. And I believe God used the cows and the plants to refer to like what humans are gonna be like in the years of prosperity. And after those 7 years, during the famine, what are the humans gonna be like in the years of famine and stuff? And so that's the same exact thing as plants and stuff, which I realized today and stuff, which I felt like was a really interesting insight, I guess, that I found. But yeah, it just also shows the authority of God above humans. When Pharaoh gathered the wisest men among Egyptians and the magicians to interpret his dreams, and I bet there were a lot of those people that's under the categories of being the wisest and the magicians, and how they were not able to interpret the dreams. But for God to use Joseph, it really shows how like God is so much more powerful, so much more superior than any of us. That no matter how many of us no matter how many brain cells we could combine, we will never be able to be as smart as God, be as wise as God and stuff. Because He is the creator of all things and stuff. And so that would include our intelligence, our mind and stuff. And so as we, again, Joseph humbly said about, in verse 16 of chapter 41, it is beyond my power to do this, Joseph said, but God can tell you what it means and set you at ease. Again, it's just Joseph acknowledging that God is the one who can interpret his dreams, and that God can be the person that helps you to be at ease in the times of trouble. And I don't think a minor detail, but just crazy how before really diving into the book, diving into these stories, I never realized these minor details about God and stuff. It just shows how God can set us at ease of our troubles if we let Him, if we trust and have faith that He will do so and stuff. Is it going to happen instantly? No, of course not. It's not going to happen instantly and stuff. It's like reading the Bible, right? We can read a lot. We can read the whole Bible in one day if we wanted to. You have to be so committed though, right? But I think it's possible to read the whole Bible in one day. But if we do that in one day, we treat it as if it's a sprint between your relationship with God. And I don't think that's the case. To be able to read one each day, it's a jog, it's enduring. How long can you endure this? It's a long race, so you have to pace. Let's say pace yourself. And so what this Bible really does is it helps us to pace ourselves accordingly, so that we get these minor details out of the book and stuff. It helps us to realize if we read through the whole thing, we're not going to be as specific about everything that happens in the book. If we just slow it down, pace ourselves and stuff. It's our relationship with God is a life's journey race. It's not a sprint to get to know God. We can do it. I'm not saying it's impossible. It is possible to know God instantly, but I feel for a majority of us, it takes time and energy and effort for us to really get to have a really intimate relationship with God. And that's okay, because that's the whole point with life, is the goal in life is for us to have an intimate relationship with God that is being processed over time. That's help us to really reflect our relationship with God and stuff. And so as we move on, God using Joseph to help save Egypt by coming up with this plan of storing the goods during the years of prosperity. And once those years of prosperity are over, then we could use the ones that we saved, bring it back out and stuff, and use it to bless others with it and stuff. And so I just find it interesting how I don't know if many of us has catch this theme of God, especially with Jacob, is God blesses Joseph, right? Joseph could have well likely just been boastful about how God's with him, how God blessed him and everything. But instead, Joseph, because he's been blessed, Joseph wants to use that blessing and bless on other people and stuff. And so that's a perfect example of how the metaphor of the 7 years of prosperity and the 7 years of famine. Joseph could have well likely stored some for his family only and not have done it for the whole country or for the whole world. But instead, he's been blessed, saying, okay, I've been blessed. What can we do in these 7 years of prosperity that gonna help us to get through famine? And that is by storing food. And by storing food, we can help those families who are struggling in the years of famine, that they may be able also be able to prosper, being blessed because of the hard works of everyone else and stuff, because of God blessing Joseph, so that Joseph may be able to pass on the blessing to others and stuff. And so yeah, with that, God blessed Joseph over and over again, from a slave to be able to work with Potiphar, be in charge of his household. Then something bad happened, then being in charge of the prison, then being forgotten again, and then being brought back to the highest position of being blessed again. It's like whenever something good happens, something bad happens, and something bad happens, something good happens for Joseph. That's how his life pattern always has been and stuff. It's like there's always, whenever something bad happens, it's always been being replaced by the good things, and whenever good things been happening, it's been replaced by bad things, and it is to test Joseph's patience with God and stuff. And so yeah, with Joseph being made second in command of the whole nation of Egypt, was just blessing is just not even the right word to describe how fortunate he is and stuff. And that we can also prosper as well. Sometimes it's hard for us to read the Bible because we see how God is being amazing to other people in the book, but for us, as we reflect on our own, like, has God ever been faithful? Has God ever been good to us as he has been to Joseph? And I will say yes, because it's like, even though it may be big blessings in Joseph's life, we can also realize that God can bless us even through the little moments of our lives. That it doesn't have to be a big moment for us to acknowledge God's blessing. God can bless us during times of our trouble. It's like, for example, my mom, my car tire has a leak and stuff. Instead of like my mom saying, okay, we can see that you have a leak in your car, leak in your tires, she got, well, now I've paid for my car tires and stuff. She could just say, okay, why don't you just go about saving your money so that you could and be able to afford pay for new tires. But instead of that, she decides to say, like, okay, I'm gonna be able to pay for it. I will pay for it, and all you have to do is pay it back to me. It's like, even though it's like, that's what mothers supposed to do, is to help support their kids. That minor detail of the role that mothers has, like, that's a blessing, right? It's like, we see it just as a job for the mothers to do. And yes, it is kind of their job, but at the same time, it's not their job to do everything for me, do everything for their kids, especially for like almost college student kids. It's like, we have to take responsibility of our own circumstances, but God has blessed me through my mom by being able to pay for my car tire and stuff. Like, be able to pay for all 4 new tires and stuff. She could well just pay for one and have me pay for the other 3, but instead she was willing to pay for the 4 tires. It may not seem to be a big deal because at the end I have to know, like, I'm still have to pay back. But be able to be grateful for the blessings that God has given me. Saying like, okay, yes, I know I have to pay it back, but I have to treasure the moment of when God has blessed me through my mom by her paying for my car, her paying for my tires when she didn't have to and stuff. And so like what I'm saying, God can bless our life. It just we have to realize that God can bless us in the minor details. We don't need to be asking for God to bless us like giving us a big house, $1 billion. It's like these are blessings. But blessings could also be the minor details and stuff. And so yeah, with that I will conclude our time for today. And before that, I just want to go back to the story of Chief Cupbearer and how like he let his good fortune to forget his promise to Joseph. And I know it's not his fault, but at the same time we ourselves have to realize that whenever something good happens to us, we have to find a way to pay it back, right? And even if the person says, oh, you don't need to do that to me, like it's gracious enough that they're able to do what they do for us, but it's even more gracious when they say like you don't have to repay them, right? But just find a way. Find a way to say like you care about them. Find a way to bless them because they blessed you. You know what I mean? Like because Joseph blessed the chief cupbearer, but it took a while for the chief bearer to come back and bless Joseph right back by mentioning him to Pharaoh, and also realizing that whenever you make a promise, try to keep your promise. He promised Joseph that he will let Pharaoh know after being released from prison, but it took a long time for Joseph for the cupbearer to come back and say, oh, I remember this Jewish man who blessed me, and I promise that this man I have made to this man, let me not repay him. It's like, try not to have the person who you promised wait, preferably a long time, try to make it soon so that nobody's feeling excluded, nobody feel like they've been forgotten or anything like that. You have to be the man or the woman of your words, right? It's like, if Jesus is a man of his words, and if we are trying to be more like Jesus, then we have to be man or woman of our own words and stuff. And so yeah, other than that, that will conclude our time for today. Before we head out, as usual, I would read a verse as a prayer for us to head out and stuff. And so yeah, I would like to read 1 Peter chapter 4, I think. Hold on. I forgot what verse I was thinking of, but 1 Peter chapter 4 verse 8, where it says, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins, right? It's like that. It's like, even though Joseph is being wrongly done, like wrongly accused and being sinned against, instead of holding on to those grudges, Joseph still loved the people who persecuted him, who put him in prison and stuff. And so may we be able to learn from Joseph that it is hard to be wrongly accused of something, but we are in control of our own actions. So may we be able to be brave enough to say, okay, you hurt me, but that doesn't mean I get to hurt you back. It just means I get to forgive you and stuff, and to love you still, no matter what and stuff. And so yeah, so may you know that God is more powerful than all of our brain cells combined. Remember, keep your words. If you made a promise with somebody, follow through that promise. Yeah, bless those. If God bless you, find yourself in a position of blessing others. Find the many detail of blessings that God has given you. And so may you go and walk with God today.